Awesome, thanks. So again, for everyone who's just joining, I'm Sam Chin. I'm the founder of Cavi Consulting, and today we're talking about engaging and winning over stakeholders, and mostly in the organizational project context. But you're going to see in this presentation, I'm going to maybe throw a different angle at it, and we're going to talk about what that means. What is the entire project context in which stakeholders should be engaged? But as you can see here in the agenda, we'll talk about the importance of engaging stakeholders, and then we'll go over what you guys should be fairly familiar with in the project management space, problem statements, goal statements, getting things in writing using a charter, and presenting simple numbers to stakeholders. So even though this may seem fairly elementary at an agenda level, hopefully we'll see in a minute that you can derive some new information that you may not have heard before. And I will pause as we go through fairly regularly so that we can engage in some discussion or you guys have time to ask questions. And as always, just feel free to kind of post them up as we go. And I'll try to get to all of them as soon as I can. All right, so the importance of engaging stakeholders. Stakeholders are everything, really. And we talk about it, we oftentimes talk about it in change management and the project context, and we are going to talk about that also. But this presentation, and especially from the process science perspective, you really want to broaden your understanding of stakeholders by first understanding the entire life cycle of business in terms of the process interactions. And what I'm talking about is if you kind of look at this diagram on the right-hand side, I'm talking about project processes versus operation or operating processes. So I'm going to level set by starting here, which is to say that operations are running in businesses. And if you had the perfect business, you would have no projects because you would just be running, you'd be profitable, and you can continue that way, and nothing would disrupt your environment. But what ends up happening is the market does change. Different pressures get added to your operations, competition comes in, you're optimizing to get better, and eventually you're going to reach a threshold just through you doing that organic process improvement where you have to make a larger change, a change that you require more people or requires more coordination or requires additional budget, stuff that you can't do in the course of your day-to-day activities. That's what actually kicks off a project. And then everyone who has been part of a project or runs projects, you know that what a project feels like, but it's good to remember it's a single process. It could be huge, it could take years, but it runs one time. And the goal of a project is to take that change and integrate it back into the operating environment. And that's your process change. And that's how you see this loop and how they're kind of coordinated with one another. So operations grow until they get to a certain point where they need a large change to stay sustainable or viable. A project kicks off and the outcome is supposed to integrate back into operations. So those, when you think about it that way, project stakeholders and operating stakeholders, they're the same people. And that makes sense. But knowing where they are in their journey and when you need to engage them and why is very important. And we tend to be very myopic about including them in the project context, but not really so much in their operating context. And understanding it and the right timing and how and when to engage and who to engage is the heart of kind of what we're going to go over today in terms of engaging stakeholders. So now I'm going to take that loop and I'm going to cut this up a little bit more based on what I was just introducing. So if you actually think about change management outside of just the project context, let's start number one here, where it's actually just purely your operating stakeholders. And who are these people? These are the people doing the work. So in the sort of, figurative factory model, let's say, you've got the people on the ground, the line folks, the people who are actually doing the painting, putting the bolts in, building the chips, whatever it could be. These are your operating stakeholders. They're the ones who are eventually going to have to put the change back in their operation. And in the digital services world, which is probably more relevant to our modern workforce, these are the people who are actually producing value for customers. Now, it could look like they're all just at their desks typing away, but what they're doing is they're doing the day-to-day work, the repeated transactions. These are the stakeholders, the operating stakeholders, who need to identify the need for change. I cannot stress this enough when we're talking about stakeholder engagement. This is sort of a base assumption that a lot of people will still challenge in top-down organizations, But if you want to successfully engage stakeholders for better outcomes, you have to understand that they need to be understanding the need for change before the change is initiated. So this is before a project even starts. And we'll talk more about this in a moment. But basically, the project itself, the entire project, is really, in the broader sense, just the planning the change stage. And all you have here in terms of stakeholders of import are your executive stakeholders or your sponsors. And these could also be operating folks who are champions, but the people who are going to drive the project, those stakeholders are oftentimes very different than the sort of operating stakeholders. But that whole project and what could be your whole painful universe for these large projects, that's really just how you plan the change. It's the outcome of the project that enables the change. And then you can see here, you're back to the operating stakeholders. So if you look at this diagram and you kind of let this sink in, what you kind of see is the people on the ground, they're the majority of your stakeholder audience in the life cycle of business evolution or just operations and projects happening. And the project part in the overall ecosystem is fairly minor. So it kind of feels backwards sometimes because we put a tremendous amount of focus in engaging stakeholders and change management in the project context, but not so much in the day-to-day operating context. So let me pause here for a moment before we move forward. Does anybody have any questions about this piece that I'm introducing? And I see a question. I always have to remind myself how to access the questions. Let's see here.
Yeah, Sam, if you click on, there should be some icons along the bottom of your PowerPoint, and there should be a little Q&A box.
Q&A, got it. Okay, this is just a hello note, so no questions yet. Let's go ahead and move forward. Thank you for the help. Always have to remind this interface. All right. So now, if anyone's familiar with change management, I do have a few slides here from ProSize, a library of figures, just for folks who are interested in sort of what we're talking about. And this all refers to the project piece. So I'm going to put this in context. So the majority of change projects are enterprise-wide. So when we talk about 45% being the entire enterprise is affected by these projects, that's a pretty big figure. That means about half of projects affect the entire business. Now, when you think about that again in relation to what is your stakeholder group you typically manage, it's usually not the entire business, right? So when you think about in the project context, you're thinking, well, I've got the same people, I've got my sponsors, I've got my project team, I've got some stakeholders that are going to be impacted. But it's often, again, the minority of the stakeholders get attention and engagement in the project context, when in reality, the entire firm or enterprise is going to be impacted. Most changes impact a large number of employees. So again, this is kind of a different view of what we just talked about, but 22% of projects affect more than 5,000 employees. And I think we can all agree, again, just to drive the point home, that a lot of times we're not engaging that many stakeholders. And this is kind of another nod in the hat for change management generally, that if you are going to actually engage stakeholders and do the proper change management, if you want to equate the two, your chance of project success or meeting your objectives or expectations is extremely higher. So good change management, good stakeholder engagement equates to statistically, you're seeing figures 6x, 93% better in terms of exceeding objectives. So this is kind of what we're talking about, the impact. It's the why. Why do we care about stakeholder management and change management? So now if we expand on the conversation we're having, and we talk about stakeholder tools, there are a lot of tools and templates to manage stakeholders. And that's what we're gonna kind of hit a different angle today of my prescriptive recommendation from doing work in the space for a long time about what I think you should be using. But generally, what I'm trying to say here is it's not even about the tools and templates as much as it's about the timing. It's about understanding this entire ecosystem that I'm describing to you, which is that if you see this little yellow part of the circle, this is your most critical change management piece. And you can see it's...
Hi there, I hope you enjoyed that last clip. My name is Michael Maludis, and if you'd like to watch the full 60 minutes of that last webcast, while also getting complete unlimited access to our entire library of IT learning, simply visit our subscribe page at greatpro.org/subscribe. Unlimited annual access is $199 per year, but if you use the coupon code LEARN2EARN, you can drop that membership fee to just $149. That's less than $13 per month for unlimited access to over 1,000 hours of on-demand career development, covering the entire spectrum of IT management best practices, including business analysis and requirements, software development, quality and testing, risk management, process improvement, project management, and even digital transformation. But your membership doesn't just give you unlimited access to our vast learning library. You also get free access to our mobile app, as well as direct access to our network of over 300 of the world's leading IT consultants, all of whom are dedicated to putting practical knowledge at your fingertips so that you can learn more and earn more. I hope you will join me in becoming a member of the Great IT Professional and advancing your career with us. And if you're on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button above so that you get notified whenever we publish new free webcasts each week of the year. Thank you for your time and best wishes for your continued success.